What makes wine feel soulful, transporting you beyond taste into a deeper emotional connection? What does experiencing a harvest firsthand reveal about winemaking that never really shows up in books? And what makes Northern Rhône Syrah come across as having black pepper and smoky notes reminiscent of pastrami? In today's episode, you'll hear the stories and tips that answer those questions in our chat with Jordan Salcito, who has just published Smart Mouth, Wine Essentials for You, Me, and Everyone We Know. And that book has just been selected as one of the 4 best wine books of the year by the New York Times. By the end of our conversation, you'll also discover how Jordan's father shaped her earliest understanding of wine as family and connection. How working at New York City's Restaurant Daniel shifted how Jordan understands wine, fine dining, and food and wine pairing. How molecular gastronomy pioneer Wiley Dufresne helped her to see restaurants as a legitimate intellectual and creative career path. How an early rejection from the New York Times became a signal to redirect her goals. And why failing the advanced sommelier tasting exam became the foundation for eventually passing the master sommelier tasting on her first attempt. Do you have a thirst to learn about wine? Do you love stories about wonderfully obsessive people, hauntingly beautiful places, and amusingly awkward social situations? Well, that's the blend here on the Unreserved Wine Talk podcast. I'm your host, Natalie McLean, and each week I share with you unfiltered conversations with celebrities in the wine world, as well as confessions from my own tipsy journey as I write my 3rd book on this subject. I'm so glad you're here. Now pass me that bottle, please, and let's get started. Welcome to episode 374. I hope you're keeping warm. So what's new in the wine world this week? A new report shows that while the number of Canadians drinking has softened to 76.2%, those who do partake are consuming higher quantities than they did before the pandemic. As well, 37% of Canadian consumers reported trying a Canadian drinks brand in the past that they hadn't tried before, accelerating the Buy Canadian movement across the country. Quebec remains the nation's biggest wine-spending province at $377 per capita, with French wines accounting for a third of sales. Ontario's story is all about the coming expansion of alcohol sales into 8,500 convenience, grocery, and big box outlets by the end of 2026, which will dramatically shift where people buy rather than how much they drink. Analysts predict that the LCBO's share of alcohol sales are projected to fall to about 3/4 of the market as consumers spread their baskets across more outlets, forcing wineries and craft producers to think about shelf presence in a new and different way. Globally, sparkling wine continues to be the mood booster of choice, with retailers talking about people treating bubbles as an everyday upgrade rather than a once-a-year indulgence. This week kicks off a flurry of food celebrations. Here we go, buckle up. On January 28th, we celebrate National Blueberry Pancake Day. Try pairing yours with a sparkling Moscato or a late harvest Riesling to mirror that fruit-forward sweetness. January 30th marks National Croissant Day, one of my favorites, and it's the perfect excuse to host a French 75 and flaky pastries brunch. January 31st is National Brandy Alexander Day, a great reason to mix up John Lennon's favorite cocktail, he called it his milkshake, so shake equal parts cognac, creme de cacao, and cream, strain into a coupe glass, and grate fresh nutmeg on top. Also on January 31st, it's National Hot Chocolate Day, so why not combine the two and create a Brandy Alexander hot chocolate? February 1st is International Ferment Day, celebrating Hungary's high-acid white grape that makes everything from brisk, dry wines to honeyed, sweet bottlings. Try a dry Tokai ferment and pair it with smoked fish or a rich pâté. On February 2nd, South Africa marks the birthday of its wine industry, tracing back to a diary entry from 1659 that recorded the first wine ever made from Cape grapes. Try a braai, which is cooking meat over an open fire or charcoal grill, very similar to a barbecue. Try a braai, which is a traditional South African barbecue of cooking meat over an open fire or charcoal grill, and pair it with Chenin, Pinotage, or maybe a Cape blend. National Tater Tot Day is also February 2nd, best enjoyed with a high-acid sparkling wine to cut through that salt and fat. Yum! And February 2nd is also packed in with Crepe Day. Why not have your own do-it-yourself crepe bar and match fillings to pores? Why does that make me think of dentistry and facial pores? Anyway, pack your crepes with citrus, pair it with a dry sparkling, or mushrooms with a light Pinot Noir, or salted caramel with a nip of brandy. We wrap up the week with National Carrot Cake Day on February 3rd, which practically begs for a glass of nutty tawny port or a spice-forward rum cocktail because carrot cake is basically dessert wearing a cardigan. In marketing moves this week, the owner of a small winery in Upper New York State, a graphic designer for 35 years, has launched a series of labels that use augmented reality to show the grapes shivering when the bottle is at the ideal serving temperature. It's playful, but it really makes me want to buy a tiny little sweater for the bottle. Meanwhile, another winery in North Fork has officially integrated AI-driven churn prediction software, which can tell with 94% accuracy which wine club members are about to cancel their subscriptions based on how often they click on emails versus how often they visit the tasting room. Over in Croatia, winemakers are celebrating a liquid gold miracle after an extreme January freeze allowed the first iced wine harvest in 5 years. Workers braved minus 9 degrees Celsius or 15 degrees Fahrenheit, which seems mild compared to some temperatures across the country this week, minus 50 Celsius with the wind chill. Ay, those grapes would be definitely shivering. So they picked in those tropical temperatures, just kidding, in a frantic 2-hour harvest to produce a honey-thick must that won't be ready to drink for years, although it's already been priced at over €100, so $150, for a tiny half bottle. Tibet's Pazu Vineyard has just completed its first-ever wine export to Hong Kong, making it the world's highest altitude winery to ship internationally. Perched between 3,500 and 3,700 meters above sea level, or 11 to 1,200 feet, in the Laza River Valley, the estate holds the Guinness World Record for the highest vineyard on Earth. Now there's your Cliff Clavin, did you know? Dinner party trivia. But here's a delicious twist. One Hong Kong buyer noted that after letting the ice wine settle in the glass, it developed aromas reminiscent of cordyceps, the prized Tibetan medicinal fungus. Scientists later confirmed that the wine contained 2 protein molecules also present in cordyceps. At those altitudes, vines can take up to a decade before producing sustainable fruit, and workers must contend with frost, sandstorms, and oxygen levels 30% lower than at sea level. I love these stories about extreme winemaking. All right, Johnnie Walker has just shattered records by unveiling the world's lightest 700 ml Scotch whiskey bottle for their Blue Label Ultra Series. The hand-blown, teardrop-shaped glass weighs a mere 180 grams. It's about the same weight as a medium-sized apple, representing a 5-year engineering feat to reduce carbon footprints without losing the luxury feel. Finland's Cairo distillery has released what they claim is the world's first sauna-finished whiskey. By maturing the spirit in a room that mimics the heat and humidity of a traditional Finnish sauna, they've managed to pull unique toasted wood and smoky notes out of the barrels that a standard warehouse simply could not replicate. A landmark scientific review published in Trends in Ecology and Evolution has found that animals consuming alcohol is far more common in nature than scientists previously believed. Fallen fruit can ferment to between 1 and 10% alcohol by volume, and fruit-eating birds and mammals regularly consume these slightly boozy treats. Another weird but wonderful scientific fact: red wine gets its beautiful color from anthocyanin, the same pigment that's found in blueberries, cherries, and plums. But you can also make white wine from red grapes by simply removing the skins before fermentation. The juice inside most red grapes is clear. Champagne's famous Blanc de Noir, white from black or white wine from black grapes, is made entirely from dark-skinned Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier. Last one for you Cliff Clavin fans. The tears or legs on a glass of wine aren't a quality signal. They're physics. They happen because alcohol evaporates faster than water, creating surface tension gradients that pull liquid up the glass, then gravity drags it back down in droplets. It's called the Marangoni effect, and it's basically your wine doing a tiny chemistry demonstration before you even take a sip. Now that's the kind of science I love. I'm sharing more sips and tips on Instagram at Natalie McLean Wines. Join me there for more of the weird and wonderful. On City TV's Breakfast Television Friday, we chatted about building the ultimate dry January survival kit with low and no alcohol options that are terrific to keep stocked in your pantry throughout the year, not just in January. We basically assembled the drink versions of the Avengers, but instead of saving the world, they'll make you the superhero of hosting to the moon. All right, scenario 1, it's Sunday morning. You're doing meal prep, heading to the gym later. Good for you, by the way. You need energy, but you don't want that sugary, jittery stuff. So what's in your survival kit for that? This is your Sunday morning reset. It's for those mornings when your brain feels like a browser with 47 tabs open, but you can't find the one that's playing the music. Please consider the Botany Energy Blue Crush from Collective Arts in Hamilton, Ontario. It's the perfect kickoff for dry January when many of us are resetting our routines. Think of it as a gentle nudge from an emotionally supportive blueberry. The Botany Energy Blue Crush is an alcohol-free drink with gorgeous blueberry lemonade flavors that's low in sugar and uses 120 milligrams of natural green tea caffeine to give you a gentle wave of energy without the jitters. It's like motivation decided to become a beverage. It's also packed with adaptogens like ginseng that help manage stress, plus vitamins B12 and B6 and L-theanine. It's basically a tiny little life coach in a can, but it doesn't ask you about your childhood because who cares? What I also love about Collective Arts is that every can features original artwork from an emerging artist, so you're sipping something beautiful inside and out. You can get the Botany Energy Blue Crush from the Collective Arts website at creativeartscreativity.com. And if you use the code BREAKFAST10, breakfast spelt out and then the number 10, so breakfast10, you'll get 10% off your first order. Do it now. These are delicious. I love them, by the way. They're just really tasty. You can also pick up the Botany Energy Blue Crush from 7-Eleven stores across the country. Survival tip. This is your fridge essential for busy mornings. Stock a few at home for weekend productivity sessions. Keep them chilled and ready. Future you will send present you a thank you note, possibly a fruit basket. You could also pair this drink with a morning power bowl with creamy acai blended thick, topped with fresh blueberries, sliced banana, crunchy granola clusters, and a drizzle of almond butter and a sprinkle of chia seeds. Emergency scenario number 2, it's Tuesday and your wine-loving friends, kinda snobby, are coming for dinner. You need something sophisticated that will not make them feel like they're drinking grape juice. What should you serve? May I suggest a savvy sommelier selection and this brilliant French duo? I have the François Lertin Fumée Blanche 0 First. This is 100% Sauvignon Blanc with 0% alcohol. You get those lifted aromas of lime and passion fruit, and the name Fumée Blanche means white smoke in French, inspired by the morning mists that blanket the vineyards, which makes me think of standing on a hilltop, wearing cashmere, white of course, and staring longingly out into the vineyard rows, even if I am just folding laundry. It has a touch of sweetness that balances beautifully with that citrus zing. The key here is that it comes from a highly respected French winemaker, François Lertin, or Françoise Lertin if you're trying to anglicize it, so your guest will recognize the quality pedigree. These wines are available in liquor stores across the country as well as online. May I suggest that you may want to pair this wine with a warm chèvre salad with crumbled goat cheese melted slightly over peppery arugula, candied walnuts adding caramelized crunch, and a honey lemon vinaigrette drizzled over top. C'est bon? Oui. Now, here's the secret for entertaining. Stock the same label in both versions. This is hostess-level chess, not checkers. We're not fooling around here. Because we also have the François Lertin Fumée Blanche with just 11.5% alcohol, so the regular version, which is still low, considering many wines from warm climates now clock in at 14% or higher. Same winemaker, same philosophy, similar aromas of citrus and tropical fruit. The palate is crisp and flavorful with lingering citrus zest and a gorgeous minerality. So when guests arrive, you can say, would you like the new zero or the original? Which is definitely far more elegant than asking, so, are you off the booze this month? You could pair the regular version with lemon herb roasted chicken with crackling gold skin, the meat so tender it falls from the bone, perfumed with thyme, rosemary, and wedges of caramelized lemon. Take me there now. Scenario 3. It's Wednesday evening. You want a cocktail, but you've got an early meeting tomorrow. What are you going to do? Well, may I suggest your midweek mirth maker, the Collective Arts Perpetual Paloma. The Perpetual Paloma, say that 6 times fast, is a blissed-out citrus bomb from Collective Arts. It's also a zero-proof cocktail that delivers a delicious combo of grapefruit and lime, followed by a light, sophisticated bitterness that makes you forget there's no tequila involved. It's like the drink equivalent of that friend who's really fun without needing a karaoke machine. This drink is gluten-free, vegan, no preservatives, and low in sugar. It probably also volunteers at the local children's hospital on weekends and returns library books early. Stock at least the 4-pack because these are perfect for any weeknight. Store them in the fridge door so they're always chilled and ready. Their shelf life is excellent since they are sealed, so buy in bulk without worrying. Wednesday nights are not the time for decision fatigue. If you have friends who come over and someone wants wine, but you have the Paloma, serve it in a wine glass with a grapefruit wheel. 80% of hosting is just confidence and citrus. This drink is also available from their website, collectiveartscreativity.com. Use that coupon code BREAKFAST10. I'll put the link and this code in the show notes. NatalieMcLean.com/374. You could also pair this drink with Bahia-style fish tacos with golden, crispy beer-battered coating tucked into warm corn tortillas with shredded cabbage, a drizzle of chipotle cream, and a squeeze of fresh lime that releases its bright, tangy perfume. Emergency number 4. You didn't realize how many emergencies you might be facing in January and beyond, did you? All right, it's Thursday, and your sister texts that she's dropping by in 20 minutes with the kids. You want something everyone can enjoy. Go! May I suggest your rosé all day, anytime from Canada's #1 wine brand, Jackson Triggs Zero Rosé. This is perfect for unexpected visits from those tiny little chaos agents and their sticky fingers that keep wrecking my living room. Sorry. This is a bottle that says, yes, come in, without trying to clean up first, because why bother after those little kiddos? It's pretty, it's pink, it's perky, and it's completely alcohol-free at 0% with lovely strawberry and raspberry notes and a crisp finish. Jackson Triggs really has nailed the zero-proof category in wine. Because it's zero alcohol, it's drive-home friendly. And let's get her on the road as soon as possible, proving that you can have your rosé and drink it too. The pink is celebratory without asking anything of you emotionally because right now you don't have it in you. It quietly upgrades the moment because less can taste like more. New research from Jackson Triggs reveals that nearly 2/3, 65% of Canadian drinkers are planning to moderate their alcohol consumption in 2026, making moderation a movement rather than a moment. Nice alliteration, JT. Moderation options must deliver uncompromising flavor. In fact, 73% of Canadians who drink alcohol say taste is the most important thing to them when considering light or non-alcoholic beverages. You could pair this one with strawberry spinach salad and ruby red berries nestled among tender baby spinach, toasted almonds adding crunch, and a poppy seed dressing that coats each leaf in sweet tanginess. But wait, there's more. What if the adults who aren't driving want just a little something something? Well, stock the sibling. May I suggest the Jackson Triggs Light Rosé with just 7.6% alcohol, which is about half the alcohol of big wines from warm climates. This is completely on trend with the move toward lower alcohol options. You get delightful aromas and flavors of strawberry and tropical fruit in a fresh, off-dry style. It's the healthier choice that still feels like a treat because you deserve nice things. Having both Jackson Triggs bottles means you can offer 0 to your sister, who is driving the kids home soon, let's hope, and the light version for yourself so you can cope with them. Just kidding. We never use alcohol to cope. Same beautiful pink color, same great Canadian winery, 2 different lanes. This is the gold standard for modern hosting. Both can be stored in the fridge and finished within a few days of opening. It's like the buddy system, but for bottles. They're happier together. Serve the light rosé with a Thai coconut curry with aromatic spices blooming in a creamy coconut milk, tender vegetables swimming alongside in a fragrant jasmine rice, the gentle heat building slowly on the plate. And our final scenario, it's Saturday night and you're hosting a tapas party. You want something festive with bubbles that won't knock everyone out before dessert. May I suggest your feeling fine fiesta party starter? The Lolia Red Sangria from Spain is a fiesta in a bottle. It already arrives in a good mood. I mean, you can't see the packaging, but it is so adorable. And yes, I love packaging as much as the next consumer. So the red version, it's got like red all over it and then what big white circles, like polka dots. And then their white version is a white bottle, like opaque, with big red polka dots. They are so cute together. Lolia is a premium, lightly sparkling sangria with just 7% alcohol. It's a gorgeous blend of Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and Tempranillo combined with natural orange and lemon juices and a touch of spice. You get these wonderful aromas of cherry, orange peel, and strawberry. And on the palate, it is full-bodied and scrumptious with ripe red berries, flowers, and those silky bubbles dancing on your tongue. Serve it chilled over ice with a slice of lime and mint leaf. It's gorgeous on camera and even better on your glass. And so the host, Dina Pugliese, on breakfast television turned to me and said, you know what? I usually don't even like sangria, but I really like this one. And I have to say, I was also really pleasantly surprised. This tastes great. And yes, it's not dry, but it's just so delicious. It's really hard to put into words. Anyway, but I'll keep trying, of course. At only 7% alcohol, guests can enjoy 2 glasses over the course of an evening without overdoing it. Keep one in the fridge and one in the pantry as a backup. You might want to pair this with paper-thin slices of serrano, the Spanish cured ham, deep ruby in color with delicate ribbons of creamy fat that melt on the tongue, releasing nutty, savory notes. Now, Lolia, as I mentioned, also comes in a white version. Again, just 7% alcohol. It's a blend of muscat and Aran grapes with natural orange and lemon juices, vanilla, and those soft, lovely bubbles. It's so elegant and delicious, it's impossible to resist. It really is. You can't. I dare you. You get these wonderful aromas and flavors of jasmine and apricot. Chill it over ice with a slice of lime and a strawberry for a picture-perfect presentation. Why not stock both colors? Red for depth, white for lift, red for heartier tapas, and white for seafood or lighter bites. And as Dina said, these are perfect for Valentine's Day. They are just so damn cute. You should see them. Anyway, go to the show notes. Take a look. If someone asks for a cocktail and you only have wine, pour the Lolia Sangria over ice with fresh fruit. It looks like you made them a custom drink. You could pair the white Lolia with Spanish tortillas with golden wedges of potato-studded egg omelet. Served at room temperature, the creamier interior contrasting with the slightly crispy edges. So let me wrap it up for you, because I'm sure you've been waiting for that. Driest January is a movement, not a moment. You can keep it going throughout the whole year. If you make it through the month without going on a kale-only diet, you're already winning. Actually, kale's good, but don't just eat kale. Moderation isn't about saying no to everything. It's about saying yes to new things. These bottles aren't just drinks. No, they're tiny declarations that you can have a beautiful, tasty, fun evening and still feel like yourself the next morning. Now go stock that survival kit. Your future self is already grateful. On upcoming TV shows, we'll be chatting about fresh spring wines in March, St. Patrick's Day wines, beers, and spirits, and environmentally sustainable drinks for Earth Hour, Easter, and Mother's Day. Let me know if you'd like your brand featured on these TV segments or future ones, or if you'd like to advertise with us through our podcast, newsletter, website, social media, or mobile apps. Please email me at natalie@nataliemaclean.com. Back to today's episode, 3 of you will win a copy of Jordan Salcito's new book. If you'd like to win one, please email me and let me know. Hey, I'd like to win. It doesn't matter where you live. I'll choose 3 winners randomly from those who contact me. Remember, this is one of the 4 best books that the New York Times nominated this year. If you're reading the paperback or ebook or listening to the audiobook of my memoir, Wine Witch on Fire, Rising from the Ashes of Divorce, Defamation, and Drinking Too Much, a national bestseller and one of Amazon's best books of the year, I'd love to hear from you. I'll put a link in the show notes to all retailers worldwide at nataliemaclean.com/374. Okay, on with the show. Jordan Salcito is an award-winning sommelier, author, and entrepreneur. She has worked for more than a decade as a sommelier at top-notch restaurants, including Momofuku, Restaurant Daniel, and 11 Madison Park, where she was part of the team to win the Outstanding Wine Service from the James Beard Foundation. Her wine programs at Momofuku were regularly recognized in the New York Times, Eater, Food and Wine, and were named the most creative wine list in the world by the World of Fine Wine magazine. Wow. Jordan passed the tasting portion of the Master Sommelier exam on her first attempt and worked harvests at world-renowned wineries in Burgundy, Tuscany, California, and Patagonia. Jordan is a pioneer of the ready-to-drink beverage category with her organic Italian spritz company, Drink Ramona. And she has just published her first book, as I mentioned, Smart Mouth. And she joins us now from her home in Paris. Jordan, we're so glad to have you here with us. Welcome.
Natalie, thank you so much for that incredible intro and for having me on the show. I'm very honored to be here.
Our pleasure. Wow, things are really lighting up in your world, and deservedly so. So let's start, though, at the beginning. How did your father's memories of making wine with his grandfather in the basement of their Connecticut home spark your own interest in wine?
My goodness. For me, that was the sort of first, I guess, exposure to wine. Even as a child, my father, whom I never met his father, but whose dad died when he was young, would talk about this one memory. And it was sort of the only memory that he has held on to. And so I always associated wine with family and connection and a thing you do together. And I grew up, far away from any vineyards. I grew up in Denver, and actually there are quite a number of wineries there now. All 50 states have wineries, but that was certainly not a part of my childhood in any way. And yet there was a familiarity. And I think that sparked my curiosity, because it was sort of like, okay, wine is this connective tissue that was interesting to me from that early age.
I so resonate with that, Jordan. I called dining out our family sport. We weren't on the LL Bean catalog with puffy vests, but we got out to dinner once a week. I don't know if my son enjoyed it so much, but anyway, he remembers that too. You write about moving into a windowless room above the headquarters of the motorcycle gang Hells Angels in New York City 3 months after college. We're jumping ahead, of course, now. What was running through your mind? How were you feeling as your parents helped you move in?
I feel like what I was thinking then at the time was, I knew ever since I visited New York. I think I was about 13, and my dad wanted to take my family, so we all went, and I just connected with it. I fell in love with it, and I was like, I'm going to move here someday. Someday I'm going to live in New York. And I just knew that on some sort of cellular level. The thing I remember is that he was crying, and I've never seen my dad cry. And and then that was when it sort of occurred to me, like, oh, maybe this is not, it's, I was out of my bubble of my liberal arts college education and my, beautiful, so I was sort of all of a sudden out of the bubble of comfort. And I don't think I had any idea what I was actually getting into. So I was not as traumatized as I should have been. It was more just, this is interesting. Oh yeah, that's what a cockroach looks like. Okay, now I know. Like now I've seen one in real life. So it was like before it all settles in, where you're in that sort of liminal space between your old life and your new life. And you don't, for me at least, sometimes I don't register the signs, whether they're good or bad, until I've had more time to process them. So I think that was that sort of moment right there.
Wow. So you ran into some cockroaches. Did you run into any Hells Angels members?
They always would gather, they would like hang out, and I was not, I was not like part of the crew, but in a way, it was like, okay, this is a safe block. Like no one's gonna mess around with the Hells Angels. And so there was that aspect that was interesting. I do remember we had a mouse in the apartment as well for a time. I'd forgotten that. My mom reminded me recently. She's like, "You remember you also had the mouse in that room." Yes, it was not an ideal scenario by any means.
Sounds relatively tame, though. Mice and cockroaches in a relatively, quote, safe area of town. So tell us now, let's jump right into your restaurant experience. That moment at Daniel Boulud's Michelin star restaurant kitchen, you are carrying the out-of-print cookbook, Great French Chefs. He walks in with a decanter of 1990 Domaine Jean-Louis Chavet Hermitage Rouge. Tell us about that.
My goodness, you have really read this book, and you've really done your homework. Thank you
Oh, my
so
pleasure.
much. That was such a surreal moment because at that point I had worked in the kitchen for, I think, about 4 months. The first 3 months were in the basement. So I think it's been remodeled now. But when I was there, the stagiaires start at the bottom, like literally the bottom of the building. And you're in this big, giant restaurant building basement that is an ecosystem in and of itself. And there was Lupe the butcher who like ran the stock pots, and it was very important to like make sure that you were super nice to Lupe and took care of his team and brought donuts on Sundays and that kind of thing. And then once I got the hang of that, I remember I came in on my day off one day, and I said, "Can I just watch? I make the things that end up on plates during service, but I never see that. Can I just stay one day for service?" And that, I think, was just, it's a good reminder that just putting in the effort gets you noticed. And I think once I did that, I was on Danielle's radar a little bit more. And then, that world, it's probably the same now, but Danielle just attracts such global, diverse group of people. I remember everyone's nickname was the country where they were from. So there was Elder, who was from Spain, and there was Michael, and he was from Ireland, and there was the other Michael, who was from England. So it was like Irish, Spanish, English, like that was everyone's nickname. And at this time, and then as a result, there was also just so much sort of sharing of information and so much curiosity. And somebody, I don't remember who, had suggested I go check out this bookstore called Bonnie Slotnick Cookbooks, where you can get all these out of print old cookbooks in the West Village. So I did that one Sunday on a day off, and ended up with this cookbook called Great French Chefs. And it was just sort of, I guess there are a few moments where it's like you can't plan it, like the universe maybe has some bigger plan, and that was an example of that. So I ended up with this book, and I think maybe I got something else too, but this was a book that I brought in to the restaurant, and people were bringing in books a lot. People were always sort of sharing what they've learned or different inspirations. And I bring this book in, and I had it with me, and I did not expect to see Danielle. But at that point, I think he had seen me working in his kitchen enough. And whenever he did, I was focused and doing a good job. And then I was walking by to get a pastry because like the pastry team would leave the extra pastries after service, and I would sometimes snack on them before walking home. And Danielle walked in at this moment, and I happened to be carrying the book, and that was what caught his eye. And so he was
Really?
like,
He was familiar with the cookbook?
he just was interested in an old looking book, and that was him. Like that was him also the sous chef, Jean-Francois of the kitchen. We called him JFK. There was Jean-Francois Bruel, who was the pastry chef. Yeah, so it was just, he was sort of like, who are you? Like, I've seen you around. What do you do in my kitchen? What's this book? And at the time, I had now graduated up to the garde manger station. So now I got to work in the kitchen at service every night on the garde manger, making the sort of those first bites that people receive when they sit down. And but then in the middle of service, my job would shift, and there were just a few people who could do this, and I had been trained on it, and I was good enough to continue doing it. But basically, you had to weave. It's like weaving these strips of potato scales around a black bass fish fillet.
What are scales? Potato scales?
Yes. So there's behind the fish station. There was a prosciutto slicer. And one of the fish cooks during the day would prep Idaho russet potatoes, like de-skin them and turn them into the shape of like a strip, sort of like that. So like an oval, like almost like like a strip of ribbon, but with rounded edges. And then, like, I had next to me a clarified butter bowl. I had the potato slicer, so I would have to slice the potatoes a certain thickness and then weave them around the paupiette, this black bass paupiette, and then brush it with clarified butter and do like as many as I could on a sheet tray, put it back in the fridge. And they had like a maybe 20, 30-minute shelf life. And so it was sort of this, but this was the signature dish. So it was like these paupiettes would get seared in a pan with butter, and it would look like a fish in the end, these scales of potato, which were really basically just crispy. Yes, and so the starch from the potato then meets the clarified butter in the pan, and then it turns this great golden brown, and it's sort of like eating not a French fry, but that sort of crisp potato buttery deliciousness. And so it was an amazing dish. I don't know if it's still on or not. I knew it came off for a while. And then it was served with a red wine sauce of reduced Syrah with thyme and butter. And the Syrah was from the Northern Rhône. And so it was just this very, very, very synergistic moment of him noticing me, asking about this book. I happen to be there and have this book. He happens to have a decanter of the 1990 Chave Hermitage, which is a red wine made from the Syrah grape. And then that just sort of, he sees the book and he takes it and he starts flipping through it. And in a couple of seconds, he's found this page and he lights up, and it's a page of of the red mullet with these tiny little circular potato scales, which is the dish that he made when he went to train with and learn from Paul Bocuse in Lyon before Daniel then returned to New York and opened Restaurant Daniel.
So it was the inspiration for his signature dish.
Inspiration dish for the signature dish, which I was then now preparing. And he's drinking this amazing bottle of wine that happens to be the same grape in the sauce.
Wow.
It just
Holy
was
convergence.
Exactly. And I don't even think I realized all of it at the time, but like within the next few days, it was sort of like that was quite wild. But ever since then, then I think Danielle he made sure that if there was a wine event happening, he would let me know about it. And during this time, I had started dating the man who I've now been married to for 17 years, a man named Robert Bohr, who
famous sommelier.
He's so talented. And he was the wine director and managing partner at a restaurant called Crew at the time, which had this.
And that had I was there, biblical, several Bibles of wine lists. It was like, exactly. Oh my gosh, this is crazy. I actually had it, not to name drop, but with Jay McInerney for my second book. And we just ordered and kept ordering. And it was Robert who served us. It was crazy, the wines, just like off the charts, not just expensive, but really unearthly. I remember a Jura wine, and that was Jay's favorite. Anyway, down a rabbit hole there.
So you've had these iconic wine moments as well. Oh,
yeah, absolutely. So what did that Rhône wine taste like to you?
For me, it was, the way I remember it was like black pepper and leather and bacon and smoke and a little bit of pastrami and meat and
Why the
red
pastrami?
wines.
What's the
Well,
connection with the pastrami?
I think it's that black pepper, that sort of like gamey black pepper. For me, that's I've just always registered it, and I now don't really eat very much pastrami, but certainly not here in France. But even in New York, I think the last time I had a pastrami sandwich was over a decade ago. But I don't know. It's just it has that very pronounced gamey but black peppery smell that is that always reminds me of a pastrami sandwich.
And did that moment affect how you saw or how you viewed wine and food pairing? Or was it the start of how you started to view
Was
pairings?
definitely the start, and that would have been around the same time that I would have been like on my days off. I would go to crew, and then I would have a similar kind of experience. I mean, not always, and certainly not with Danielle, but that the sort of access to those special wines, and because you were at crew too, and that I think that moment in New York was that was just the moment where I happened to be learning about wine, and I feel so lucky that was the case, because now these wines, when I want to buy them on a wine list, they're 10 times the price of what they were back then, and so that part I lament, but I also am so grateful for those reference points, because now it's like once you have that kind of moment, and now those particular wines are so expensive, but there are others that are not, that are still amazing finds. For me, like the Envinate wines from Spain are so soulful, and now those prices are in the $100 and $200 a bottle, but you can still find that are some that are sub 100, and just a couple years ago it was like $50 a bottle, and that's always happening. And it's sort of
Sure.
like,
As they
who
get discovered.
cares?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
And what does a
Who
soulful wine mean to you? How, I know it's hard to describe, but what does a soulful wine have?
Yeah. All right. For me, it's like a wine where I feel it in my bones, like a wine where I take a sip and I'm transported, and it's a moment where you're sort of one with the philosophy of whoever it was making this wine. And presumably anyone who's doing a great job like that is also like deeply respectful of the land. And I think that is one of the things that I do think, and of course we it's taboo, or not taboo, but it's sort of passe to say old world and new world. But one of the things that I loved in researching this book and writing this book was this, there's a Jancis Robinson definition, and she ties it to technology. And she says, of course, in fact, like old world, new world is technically any country making wine after the 14th century, which is sort of wild to think that that's new world. New, exactly. But basically, that was colonization, or maybe it's 15th century, but basically colonization. But really, it's also technology, like what has happened, and the way that it sort of has manifested today is there's a new world approach of, okay, I want to craft a wine. Though, yeah, I guess it almost can also be summed up by the word for winemaker, which doesn't exist in France. The winemaker, the word is vigneron, or vine grower. And so
Right.
you have,
It's not about ego.
yes,
It's about the
exactly.
vines. You
You're
are
not
a servant of the
making,
vines. Yeah.
exactly, you're not making the wine. Like grapes are going to ferment,
The
whether or
vines
not.
make the wine or the grapes.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. And so
Wow.
there's this sort of reverence to place, and to expressing that place, and to the viticulture and the growing of the vine without all this intervention.
Right. And
And
that's probably why on old world labels they're putting place, not grapes, right?
yes,
Yeah.
exactly right. Exactly right.
Okay. Yeah. It's about the place. The place does it all, or most of the work, the heavy
Yes,
lifting.
exactly.
So you worked harvest in some of Burgundy's most legendary estates, including Domaine du Jacques, Comte Liger Billard. Oh, my French is bad. And Domaine d'Arlot. The 2006 harvest at Domaine Largeau you described as an epiphany that sealed the deal for my wine career. What specifically happened during that harvest that you couldn't have learned, say, in a restaurant dining room or from studying?
Yes. Okay. So I think so many things. There was that sort of that memory of place, and this sort of physical memory. So all of a sudden, I've like studied the maps, and all of a sudden I'm in a vineyard, and like I'll just pick two to show a contrast. One, the largest vineyard that we harvested was called Clos de Forêt. It's a very large vineyard. 2006 was a pretty rainy, muddy year. So I remember like everyone's wearing borrowed Wellingtons that haven't been worn since the year before. So you sort of have caked mud all over them and they sort of fit, but not really. And you're wearing these overalls that you're putting over your other clothes. So that was the sort of most of the experience, was just being in the vine and seeing the bugs, and but then also understanding the slope. Like, okay, this one was pretty flat for most of it. It's on a gentle slope, whereas like there was a sunnier day and we harvested Susho, which is in Von Romane, and the slope was completely different and the sun was different. And I remember seeing a praying mantis, but it's just sort of like, okay, the sun hits this place differently. The soil drains differently. It's not, I don't need the boots. I don't need the, so like you start to understand in physical terms things that you can read about. But for me, it was just so much easier to understand them while being there, let alone the whole full experience. So it was a 10-day harvest.
So this is the other sort of half, like you talk about soulful wines you feel in your bones, but this is you experiencing the harvest with your bones, feeling it bodily, that slope or the rain hitting you or whatever, like all of that, very physical, as you say.
Very physical. And then also understanding how decisions are made in real time, because there are a lot of things that would never make it into a book. And in fact, in most wineries, I think pretty much at every harvest, except for one that I can think of, you see things and it's like, okay, hey, we're not going to talk about this outside. And it's nothing secretive, but it's just sort of like, wouldn't make sense it's like, oh, in this vineyard, it happens to be a Pinot Noir vine that mutated to white grapes. So there's a fair amount of white grapes in this red wine, and it doesn't matter, but it's also not discussed and it's not talked about. Or let's see, what's another example? You see how decisions are made in real time. Like, okay, it's sunny today, like there's a break in the rain, so we need to harvest Susho because after tomorrow it's going to be too ripe and we can't let that happen. So there's sort of the physical and a logistical understanding of how decisions get made. And then you also see like, okay, in every winery I've worked at, except for one in California, there's nothing added. There's no yeast helpers. There's no, there isn't that kind of help or support for the grapes. And I mean, I would say like there were a couple of times where like an experiment was taking place, but by and large, sort of like, no, this is just, we sure will experiment because we're curious, but this is how we do it. And this is how we've always done it. And we experiment in different ways, but not with the integrity of the grapes or the process of fermentation. And that was very, very different from the harvest that I worked in California, and also the winemaking course that I took from the UC Davis. And it was just completely different versions of how to make wine, or the winemaking process at my UC Davis course, which hopefully has been updated now. But I remember there was a chapter about fermentation, and I was literally told, sometimes people will say that they are not adding yeasts, but that's actually impossible. They're not telling you the truth. It's not even possible to do that anymore because yeasts are so strong that now they're everywhere. So we recommend you come with us to the yeast store. Here, come along, camera, and here are all the yeasts that you can buy. And it was just such a very different, I mean, that's not, for me, those wines are not the wines that I feel on a cellular level as a sort of, but they are one way of making wine, and they're one way of making a clean wine and a very correct wine that's going to taste, more consistent over time. So I see the benefit. However, the wines that got me excited at the beginning of my career are just have a different approach.
Awesome. So after working at the molecular gastronomy restaurant WD50 with Wiley Dufresne in New York City, you write that it was there you began to consider a life in restaurants and redirected your dreams. What was it about Wiley's approach of valuing curiosity and research that resonated so deeply with you, especially as someone who came to New York City wanting to be a writer?
Yes, I think for me, that was the first time where I sort of saw or felt a familiar I guess I felt familiarity and aspiration within the restaurant community. Prior to that, I had worked at a restaurant as a hostess and then a manager and a server, and it was sort of a thing that just felt wrong, but it was sort of like, well, I need to pay rent and figure out what the next step is. So it felt wrong, but it was sort of the necessary step. For me, I was really grateful to encounter somebody who was so smart and so respected, who also had an education that was similar to mine. Because I think at that moment in my early 20s, my education was not feeling very useful. And I remember feeling that through a lot of my 20s. It was sort of like, what am I actually going to do with this degree? Like, because you don't learn the skills of working at college by design. You learn the skills of thinking, and that was something that Wiley really celebrated. And that was I feel so lucky to have encountered Wiley and WD-50 at that moment in my life, because it was sort of like, okay, and to know his path too. Like, before he could be Wiley Dufresne with WD-50 and 71 Clinton Fresh Foods, he was a sous chef at Jean Georges, where he worked with a very classical understanding of cuisine. And so that sort of notion of learn the rules and then you can break them. But it's important to understand on a foundational level, yeah, the purpose and the sort of thinking that gets you from this more classical framework to a more creative approach. And that was also really interesting. And so I think seeing Wiley was having a human example of someone who did value these things that I had been taught to value and that I wanted to continue to be able to value, and hadn't found that in a restaurant environment until working there. And this was also prior to Danielle and prior to 11 Madison Park. That was sort of pre Danielle, but that sort of kicked off this idea of, oh, wait a minute, there's real craft and history and creativity here, and maybe I'll stick around here for a minute. And it's funny, I had also been in touch with an editor from the New York Times. I think I was still living in Colorado at the time, but she was going to publish an article, which eventually I ended up getting a paycheck for, but never published. And then I had pitched an idea, and I was told, like, oh, no, I don't think that's going to work. And it was about like various kitchens that I had staged in before taking this job at Danielle. And it ended up that she was like, no, that's not going to work. And then my dad, maybe 2 months later, my dad sends me this article. It was in the New York Times Magazine. And he's like, didn't you pitch this article with exactly these same examples and chefs? And it was sort of wild. It was a great moment. It was a gut punch moment of like, oh, this idea was good. And so this person who had the power to take it did. And a part of me felt like small and resentful. And the other part of me was like, you know what? That was a good enough idea for an editor of the New York Times to publish that idea. At the time, I was thinking, okay, well, I'm working at Danielle, and I think at the time, a couple years prior, there had just been a book written about the fourth star, is what it was called. And it was like a journalist's account of working in the kitchen at Danielle to see what takes a restaurant from 3 stars to 4. And for me, I didn't want to write that same book, but my thinking was like, where can I learn the most and be as educated as possible? And that place was Danielle, of the places that I visited and got to work in, and it just felt very inspiring to be there. And it was while I was in the kitchen that this whole thing happened with the New York Times, which is, by the way, a publication I have a lot of respect for and read regularly. But I think that was a great moment of, just sort of saying, why am I chasing this? Am I chasing this because I decided that I should? And I think sometimes, for me at least, there's comfort in setting a goal. And then it's sort of like, okay, like I used to run cross country, and it's like, you have the goal and you run towards it, and you run over streams, and you run, around the trees, and there will be obstacles, and you will not pay them any attention. And I think that was a helpful moment, because sometimes it's time to redirect the goal. And I think that was another, in a weird way, another helpful sign that was like, you're on, yeah, go back to this path. This path is there. That's the green lights. You're getting some yellow and red lights over here. But like this light is, in fact, that same editor I have to thank in a weird way, because I remember she told me, I said, you think you have such this amazing career. Do you have any advice on writing? And she said, yeah, you should like work in an industry for 10 years and then you should think about writing something.
Wow. Wow.
I didn't really like that advice very much. And then, indirectly, that's what ended up happening. And that sort of indirectly led to Smart Mouth in a
That's
very
true.
serendipitous kind of way.
Well, you've got a great attitude toward the setbacks that you use them to actually move forward. That kudos to you, Jordan. And now you're in the New York Times for your book. All right, let's talk about this. You passed the Master Sommelier blind tasting exam on your first try, which is extraordinarily rare given the pass rate's about a dismal 10%. What do you think was the key to that success? Was it just studying and tasting a lot, or were there some other things you did or examples you can share that really helped you nail that?
Of course. So the first most important thing is that I failed tasting on my advanced exam. And I thought of myself as a pretty good taster. And so I went in and
So this is the level below Master Somm, right?
exactly. It goes certified or intro, certified, and then there's a real jump up between advanced and then master. And so I had passed the first two tests, which
On
each
the
are
master level, yeah. Okay.
exactly. So like I'd passed the introduction, and then a year later I passed the certified, which all of these tests are comprised of three parts. There's the blind tasting, the service practical, and then the theory. And fast forward to advanced, and I definitely studied a lot, and I really studied hard and had a great system and all that, and I didn't think of tasting as my weakness. And so I think I don't know, I mean, it's hard to like remember exactly my frame of mind. I'm sure I was certainly nervous, but I think I was nervous with an underlying confidence that I could get through that, more so than I had for the other two sections that I ended up passing. And anyway, I totally failed the advanced tasting the first time. I passed it the second time, but I failed it the first time. And I remember I called Sancerre Chablis because, as I've learned since, the first time you smell something, basically those strong aromas will stay in your brain. But then if you go back and you try to smell them again within the next 10 or 15 seconds, you won't be able to. So I remember like something that was like, gooseberry, but then I didn't get the gooseberry, but then I was only getting these other things. And anyway, so I flubbed. And as a result, I tried to get really curious about why. I mean, it was another gut punch moment of like, ugh, really tasting? And then I asked people who I knew who were great tasters. And one of the people I asked was Bobby Stuckey, who is an amazing human and master sommelier based in Boulder, Colorado, was very much an early mentor to me. And Bobby has been, I tasted with Bobby in those early days, and Bobby said to me, he's like, you know who taught me to taste is a guy named Jay Fletcher, and he lives in Aspen, and he's very talented. And I remember I don't know how I got on his radar, but I'm sure I just went up to him and I was like, look, I know that you have mentored these four mentors of mine. They all speak really highly of you. I will, if I can get myself to a place and a time that's convenient for you, would you taste with me? Would you give me some pointers? And he said yes. And so my family is still in Colorado. So I think I would go up on like Christmas holiday or like times where I was in Colorado. I would see if he was available. And long story short, he approached tasting in this totally different way, which is the way that I like to think of it now. And it's just a game of logic, basically. So it's sort of like, okay, and of course you have to have an understanding of the broad strokes of things, but like, I remember a revelatory moment was we were tasting Pinot Grigio. I didn't know what it was at the time, but he was like, well, smell it. Does it have oak? And, oh, all right. But it was like, it sort of smelled not brioche, but like, yeah, like that sort of bready, like white bready. And then it was textural, but it also wasn't like textural in the way of like a beautiful rounded wine from an oak barrel. So it's sort of like understanding, okay, well, this wine doesn't have new oak. It doesn't have any oak. It doesn't smell or taste like oak. And yet there's some texture. Okay, it's Pinot Grigio because it is light pink in color. If you look at it compared with these other white wines, there's a light pinkish hue versus a greenish hue or a yellowish hue. That's sort of clue one. Clue two is it's textural, but it's not fulfilling. It's sort of, how do wineries that are not investing in oak barrels get texture? Will they just leave their wine in contact with the lees for a longer period of time?
The spent yeast cells, the lees that have died out. Yeah.
Exactly. So just starting to get a handle on those sort of tactics, like oak is expensive. A new French oak barrel is €1,000, which depending on the exchange rate is between what is that right now? Like almost $1,200.
Yeah, mark it up 30% for Canadians, but it's expensive. Yeah,
Yes.
so he was really going deductively, like just look at all the clues, almost like Sherlock Holmes kind of.
Exactly.
How can we break this down to come to a conclusion?
And that was exactly it. And even like tasting wine, like for tannins, like getting a sense of the nuance of tannin, like low, middle, high. What about medium plus versus high? So like you sort of you trap a little bit between your lip and your gum, and it's unmissable. A high tannin wine is unmissable when you start to do that, and you do that enough times and you get enough reps under your belt. So part of it was the right thinking and the right process. And then the rest of it was just, enough reps. And enough of that was what led me to have success in the tasting exam when I ended up taking it at the master level.
10,000 hours of practice. That's Malcolm Gladwell. Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed our chat with Jordan. Here are my takeaways. Number one, what makes a wine feel soulful, transporting you beyond taste into a deeper emotional connection? As Jordan explains, for her, it's a wine that she feels it in her bones. I love that. It's a wine where she takes a sip and she's instantly transported. The wine creates a moment where you're sort of one with the philosophy of whoever was making that wine and is deeply respectful of the land. She says it can be summed up by the word for winemaker, which doesn't exist in France. The word is vine grower, and it's that reverence to place and to expressing the land, to the viticulture and the growing of the vine without a lot of intervention. Number two, what does experiencing a harvest firsthand reveal about winemaking that really never shows up in books? Jordan talks about feeling the harvest bodily, the slope, the rain hitting you, all of it very physical. As she says, it's about understanding how decisions are made in real time, because there are a lot of things that aren't expressed or would make it into a book. You get both a physical and logistic understanding of how decisions are made. And number three, what makes Northern Rhône Syrah remind Jordan of the black pepper and smoky notes in pastrami? As Jordan says, she also gets the sort of leather and bacon notes in this wine. It's got a gamey black pepper note that she's always registered with it. She doesn't really eat a lot of pastrami, but the last time she had a sandwich over a decade ago, it had a very pronounced gamey black peppery smell that always reminds her of the sandwich. And that reminds me of a bizarre connection I often find in Bordeaux wines. Often they smell like Band-Aids to me. And it's not off-putting. It must be a certain type of oak or something. If you know why I'm smelling Band-Aids, let me know. Or if you've ever smelt Band-Aids in a wine, let me know. Am I alone in this? Am I just weird? All right, if you missed episode 7, go back and take a listen. I chat about working as an undercover sommelier in New York's finest restaurants with Bianca Bosker, author of the bestseller Cork Dork. I'll share a short clip with you now to whet your appetite.
One of the things that was really revelation is the fact that many of these high-end restaurants are judging you even more than you're judging them. They're Googling you before you come in. They're keeping extensive logs on what you order, your pet peeves, personal preferences, your relationship to the restaurant. If you spend a lot of money, you could be a wine PX, which is short for personne extraordinaire. If you're a temper tantrum, you might be an HWC, which is short for handle with care.
Oh.
Or SOE, which is a sense of entitlement. On the surface, it can seem perhaps mercenary, but they are businesses. I mean, liquid keeps restaurants liquid.
I've heard it said that the sommelier doesn't sell the bottle to the customer. The sommelier sells the customer to the customer. Not in a manipulative way, but I see you and I think this is you with the wine. And of course, the old adage is customers will eat you poor and drink you rich. You won't want to miss next week when we continue our chat with Jordan. Do you know someone who'd be interested in learning more about behind the scenes of the restaurant world and wine lists? Please let them know about this podcast. Email or text them now while you're thinking about it. It's easy to find the Unreserved Wine Talk podcast. Just tell them to search for that title or my name, Natalie McLean Wine, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, their favorite podcast app, or they can listen to it on my website at nataliemclean.com/podcast. Email me if you have a sip, tip, question, or if you'd like to win one of 3 copies of the books I have to give away. I'd also love to hear your thoughts on this episode, or if you've read my book or are listening to it. Email me at natalie@nataliemclean.com. In the show notes, you'll also find a link to take a free online food and wine pairing class with me called the 5 Food and Wine Pairing Mistakes That Can Ruin Your Dinner and How to Fix Them Forever at nataliemclean.com/class. And that's all in the show notes at nataliemclean.com/374. Thank you for taking the time to join me here. I hope something great is in your glass this week. Perhaps, of course, a Rhône Valley Red with what else? A pastrami sandwich. You don't want to miss one juicy episode of this podcast, especially the secret, full-bodied bonus episodes that I don't announce on social media. So, subscribe for free now at nataliemclean.com/subscribe. Meet me here next week. Cheers.